Hello and welcome to another episode of the Self-Made Podcast. On this episode of the show, it's a little bit different because I get on my coach, Blake West. Blake works with Alan at Maximum Performance Training and has been looking after my training now for probably the past 6 to 8 weeks. When I came in to get coaching, my aim was to get a little bit leaner, but the main aim is to be able to invest in a coaching program for a long time. And a lot of what Blake goes into here in this episode is not throwing the kitchen sink at clients straight away. Whether that comes from how much volume you put on your training to how hard you're pushing in dieting. We speak about the mental issues with dieting. We speak about the consequences of dieting too hard for too long and some strategies of how to work around that both mentally and physically. This is a really, really fantastic episode for anyone out there that's looking to embark on a diet themselves or is currently dieting themselves to understand what it really takes to get in shape and some of the things to be aware of. If you want to be able to set some really solid expectations with your own diet and your clients' diets, this is a really good episode to talk about how you work around social occasions, when to pull back, and when you need to create strategies. A really solid episode, as I said, for anyone who is dieting or soon to be dieting. So without further ado, I will leave you with myself and Blake West. So, Blake, for anyone who doesn't know you, obviously this is a slightly different podcast to usual because you are actually my coach. So we might talk about that at some point here. But other than being my coach, anyone who doesn't know who you are, tell us about Blake.
What's up, guys? I'm Blake West. So my journey within the health industry kind of started, I grew up working out. I had an older brother. He competed in bodybuilding. I played sports in high school. So, I kind of grew up around that environment a little bit. And I never really got serious about it until about 2015. I moved to Tampa, Florida. I got involved with I'm sure you're familiar with the N1 guys, Chasm, Joe Bennett. They were kind of together at that point. Bryce Baum. I got involved with them, and really what got me really involved with it was initially it was the biomechanics aspect of it. I was just very intrigued by it, and I got put through a few sessions by those guys. They taught me a lot. And I was like, man, if I would have known this shit years ago, I would have a lot more muscle tissue and probably a lot less body fat than I do right now. I just learned a lot from them. And, I just kind of put 2 and 2 together. Hey, the more I learned from them, the more I wanted to share that information with people. And that's kind of where it all started for me. I started personal training after that in person with one-on-one clients, basically because at that point I was just very intrigued by the biomechanics half. I wanted to teach that. And that grew. And then eventually, in my head, I wanted to go online full time. Eventually, I didn't know how or what that would even look like. And then I got hooked up with Alan Kress, and he brought me on his team. And now here we are, a few years later, and full-time online coach. I still train a couple people in person. They're almost friends at this point, so it's kind of hard to get rid of them. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. That's where I'm at. With my team and kind of how we coach, it's more so of a functional based approach. We deal with a lot of hormonal aspects, gut, people with gut issues, things like that. We take a more of a functional approach. We also, we have our competitor clients, we have our physique clients, but we do take a little bit of a different approach there.
So with the mechanics stuff, obviously, it's become the new in trend where for 90% of the world now with coaches to go into the mechanics stuff. And obviously some people apply it really well, some people apply it really poorly. How much of an advantage do you think it was for you to be actually have those guys on your doorstep and actually experience them firsthand rather than trying to learn them remotely?
I think I was very blessed. I think I got lucky to kind of stumble upon them when I was living in Tampa. It was a blessing, man. It completely changed how I trained. Before that, I didn't know my lats have probably never contracted to 100% of my life. I think a lot of people struggle with that. So little things like that, I think have really, really helped me put on tissue along the way. I think it's definitely been a blessing, and it got me involved with, the career that I'm into now. So that's just kind of where it all started. But
lats is the one that always sort of opens people's eyes, isn't it? Because everyone can squeeze the quads, everyone can squeeze the biceps. I remember getting up. I can't remember what it was. But someone gave me a cue on a single arm dumbbell row, and I've never felt my lats like it. And they cramped for about an hour. And they like that. I think for me that was like, because I'm the same like you, like very much a like mechanics nerd. As soon as I got into it, and like, but even before mechanics was really the thing, like it was like, you know, like I want, ever since probably that moment, I wanted to learn more about an execution. When I went my last place of employment, I want to be that guy. It's like, right, I'm not the biggest guy in here right now, but I want to be the guy that can take someone who thinks they are lifting heavy and strong and makes them crippled on a bodyweight squat or one plate on a leg extension.
Exactly, man. And I knew that going into it. Like I'm not the biggest guy in the world. You know, I don't have the best mom and dad when it comes to genetics, and I knew that I need to kind of find my niche in the industry, and it had to be something different than just like a walking advertisement, because I knew that was never going to be the case for me. I was always going to be around. There was going to be bigger guys. There was going to be, you know, leaner guys. And I just needed to find my way in. And that was it, because you don't see a lot of people teaching it the right way. You kind of, everyone's going to make this argument like, hey, you know, Ronnie did it back in the day, training the way that he trained, or, you know, Arnold did it the way that he trained. But, you know, if they would have trained a little bit different, if they would have understand the biomechanics, like how much better could they have been? So I always like to make that argument too.
Or how much longer could they have done it?
Oh, absolutely. How much longer could they have done it? They wouldn't be probably having half the joint issues that they're having now, but all great bodybuilders on, you know, all amazing physiques. But at the same time, you could argue how much better could they have been and how much more longevity could they have had?
So with the, when we going into that world of mechanics, we talked about the education of it. And we're saying that some people apply it very, very poorly. What's the biggest things you tend to see in trainers that are like, they're sort of there, but they're missing that sort of little bit in terms of getting more out of their clients?
I think what I see the most is people just running people when it comes to one-on-one training. What I see is them just running them into the dirt. Like they'll think it's almost a pat on them back to themselves for like making someone throw up on a leg day. It's just like, man, anyone can do that. I can throw a bunch of volume at you too and make you do 10 sets of hack squats and you'll probably throw up. But could you get more out of that, or even just the same amount out of that with 3 sets if your execution improved, if your effort improved? So I see that a lot with one-on-one training. It's like, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at this person. I'm going to give them all sorts of volume, and I'm just going to make them feel out of breath and gassed because I'm putting them through so much. But you know, a little can go a much longer way if you optimize it correctly.
Yeah, 100%. I think when you see this all the time, both in nutrition and training, which I'm sure we'll cover both. When it comes to sort of like training, a lot of the times the argument is the client experience. Like, so I remember for a while that everyone put some form of track, metabolic conditioning at the end of the session. There was always some prowler, there was always an air dyne bike, there was always a dead mill. And then it was like, you've got to give them the experience. You've got to make them feel like they've got something that they could get nowhere else. And I'm sitting there like, I'm all for, there's a balance to be had between what's optimal in your head, who loves the gym and loves training, and enjoyment for someone who doesn't love training and you're trying to get into it. But I've never, ever, ever, ever in my life had a client come to me and go, could we skip this set of bicep curls? Because I'd really like to do some metabolic conditioning. Like, no one, but we feel it's what they want. And I think there's a skewed image, especially when you're a personal trainer, it's like what we think the client wants and what they actually want.
Yep. I mean, people just tie that conditioning feeling to, I'm going to lose body fat. And, you know, a lot of times that's just not the case. A lot of times it's driving more stress and, you know, driving recovery even lower, which is going to make progress even, you're going to get further away from where you want to be. So, I mean, I think there's a time and a place for the metabolic conditioning stuff, but I think you can't run it in the dirt. You can't do it for an extended amount of time. You're going to start having these diminishing returns. But yeah, man, I was like you. I'm like, okay, when I get this client, I want them to be able to take something from these sessions. I don't, like, moving forward, I don't want them to need me forever. I don't want them to just show up for a workout and be on their way. I want to be able to teach them something that they can take with them years down the road, you know, as they get further into this journey. And that was always my goal with it. It wasn't like, okay, you're going to come in, I'm going to train you for an hour and you're going to be on your way. I want you to be able to take something from it.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, it's both rewarding from a client perspective for that reason, for the reasons that you stated, but also rewarding from a coach, right? In the sense of Like, I know the times in my life where, I've been on top of my study, I've been looking at things, I've been applying things, I've been like pushing my business forward. I tend to in turn give a better energy to my sessions, give a better quality of service. And I tend to enjoy my business more. The times where maybe there was things going on in my personal life, whatever, where I was distracted, and it became more than I'd like it to be just that hour. It doesn't win in either way. And I think a lot of that comes down to like a lot of trainers not actually knowing what they're trying to achieve from the session. You mentioned trying to burn calories, and I'm like, I reckon so much of this would be solved if people got into heads like, this is not what the weight training part of this is really for. If you took away that, 90% of dumb shit I think would go away.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, it's not about coming in there and just burning as many calories as you can. I agree. I mean, it doesn't take an educated trainer to be able to do that to somebody. I mean, you could get your average Joe off the street, and he could go in there and have someone burn some calories. So, I mean, I just don't think. I think there's not a lot of education behind some of these trainers' philosophies, these one-on-one trainers' philosophies. It's more so get as many people in the door as I can, get as many sessions as I can, hour sessions as I can throughout the day, and let me send them on their way, and they come back next week. When in reality, they learn nothing. They might be sore for a few days. They might puke during the workout, but what did you teach them, or, what did they get out of that other than possibly even making them a little bit worse by driving recovery down? Like, and that's kind of where I wanted to get away from in-person training, because we take a lot into account with online coaching. It's like, how much stress are you under? How much that determines like what kind of program can you even handle at this point in your life. When you get one-on-one people coming in there, you don't know what kind of day they had. You don't know what kind of week they had. You don't know what they're going through stress-wise. So can they even handle this much volume during a session? Or are you just pushing them further and further away from where they need to go?
Yeah, I totally agree with this. I've said this for a while, like going into a little bit more the online space now, although I do a little bit of one-to-one, is that it's looking at online, it's almost more the macro as opposed to like one-to-one training, which is the micro. And don't get me wrong, obviously we're looking at program, we're looking at recovery, we're doing all that thing with our one-to-one clients, but as you said, you don't know what the day is like. They're often stressed, often busy. They're often not. You one-to-one clients often pay because they want someone there to tell them what to do. So you tend to get people that aren't immediately, depending on your niche, interested in the gym. Where you online people, especially people who aren't in the same country, you have sought you out. So they're kind of like, I know what you're about. I kind of like training. So you can sort of, it's more about, right, where do I want you to be in 6 months, a year, 18 months, rather than, right, let's make sure this week is good.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more there.
Yeah. Like I think you're definitely, certainly with training. I mean, going back to sort of the calories in thing, I think it's hard. It's sort of like heartbreaking if someone actually knew how many calories are actually burned. Like not what the Apple Watch says, what it's actually happening. Like you get what, an extra digestive biscuit after an hour and a half of work. It's like, it's not worth it.
No, it's not worth it. And that's funny that you say that, because I just got an Apple Watch a few weeks ago, and I freaking hate it because I'm coming more anal with tracking things, and I was never like that before. At the same time, it's like, how accurate are those things? Like, you don't know. You really just don't know.
Yeah, it's exactly. And I think, I've seen all sorts of things when it comes to workouts. Like, I remember fairly recently, so you can probably work out where this was, which is quite shocking. Yeah, by the way, I get myself in trouble a lot for saying things, so be aware of that. I'll get cancelled at some point. A1 was a rack pull. A2 was a bench press. All right, fair enough. A3 was a prowler sprint. A4 was a burpee.
Oh, my gosh.
Can you imagine that second deadlift? And the idea was, I'm moving on. Just like, look what you're trying to achieve. Like, get more specific with that. Like, you could get so much more out of something with way less baggage.
Yes. No, I agree. And the way that we program, I think there's a time, maybe not for that to that extent, what you just said, as far as that giant set that you described, but I think there's a time and a place for systemic type training. And like, you've even been through one of those phases. It's never for an extended amount of time, because that's just so much stress on your body. Now there's a time and a place to bring up that system and bring up, that energy system to further progress within like the large goal, whether it be, typically it's hypertrophy. But because we never want like conditioning to be the limiting factor on a set of hack squats. So we need to transition into that type of phase for 2 to 3 weeks, and then we come back out of it. But you see a lot of these people are like these boot camp style gyms, if you will, promoting this year round to where it's a circuit style training. And then they run into, you might lose weight initially. Then you start to run into these issues. You hit plateaus, digestion starts to go downhill, hormones start to downregulate, and they wonder what the hell's going on. Well, it's you're so stressed out, your cortisol's so high, and now these other systems are starting to downregulate because of it. So that doesn't get taken into account nearly enough, in my opinion. And I just don't agree with those boot camp style training or those circuit style setups to, for an extended amount of time.
Especially when they're often marketed for people who are often very busy, very stressed, often lack recovery in the first place, right? That's where the issue is.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, people will write these programs for like beginner lifestyle clients and just throw everything at them, throw those circuits in the mix, and they have no idea what's even going on in their life outside of that.
Yeah. I remember, there's a guy called Paul Standel who works for the Muscle Mentors. I don't know if you've seen like Callum Bracetricks in the UK. Yeah. And he talked about CrossFit, and he talked about it as like someone writing a CrossFit workout. It's like they just give it to a guy with Tourette's. Like, please, like. And I just thought that it's just random because we haven't had a jumpy thing yet today, rather than anything really specific as to what actually we're trying to do with this.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, there's no goal with it. Just move as much as you can, and we don't care where the tension is. We just want you moving.
Yeah. So like we often spoke a lot, like obviously the systemic work is we said about where there's a time and a place for that. And I remember when I opened that first workout program that you gave me, and I was just like, it's so much harder doing sort of like a full body, almost GBC style workout.
Yep.
When you've been in the game for a while. Like I've given this to like a lot of beginners for exactly the same reason. The conditioning sucks. They're training 3 times a week, so they want a level of frequency. But because they don't know how to generate intensity, this is almost a time where having a lot of repetition, a lot of practice, and going between big muscles could be an argument for it, because they're not getting the most in the first couple of weeks from what you're doing. But it was such an experience going through it again. It's been so many years where I've done a block like that. And I tell you what, as brutal as it was, I'm very, 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 very glad I did it. Because like I feel better, my health feels better, besides the one reading which we always spoke about there. But I feel good, my weight's coming down, and my conditioning's in a better place. And it's just like it gave me such an experience of what I do with my clients, of what works and what things don't. And I think it's good for the coach system. It's like going back and going through some of those blocks, even if you don't want to. It's probably well worth it.
It's well worth it. And we almost use it like when we deload people, we'll use that rather than, just pull volume down. We'll introduce a new stimulus and bring up those energy systems while we're desensitizing ourselves from that hypertrophy stimulus. And we go back into hypertrophy, and guess what? You need less volume now to progress because you took some time away from it to bring up other systems.
So for people who don't know much about sort of like, obviously a lot of the thing you've got from the N1 stuff you mentioned, and obviously Alan, and they're very, very specific in terms of where they're driving their stimulus, where they're driving their training. So like for people that don't know about sort of that sort of world, like how do you start piecing together a program for somebody, what somebody needs, why you would go for a certain approach? Like how does this work for you?
Well, the first thing I'm looking at is what have they been doing for the past 6 months? And it's usually like a kitchen sink approach, man. You'll see like a little bit of metabolic stuff, a little bit of like tension-based stuff. You'll even see some neurological stuff thrown in there. And that's really what I base it off of. Like where's their lifestyle, stressors, things like that at, how are they handling that? And then also like as far as volume goes, I'm not going to throw a bunch of volume on someone who has just a, crazy life going on. But it's really a matter of like looking at their program training wise, seeing where they've been for the past 3-6 months. If you have to dig that deep. And then, I like to initially get as far away from what they've been doing as possible initially. And it could just be for 2 or 3 weeks, but that's typically what I do initially.
Okay. And then as you said, like with the deload, it's almost like so you can desensitize what their goal is so that you can come back to it with a little bit more aggression with it, really.
Exactly.
Okay. So, so you mentioned that. So you mentioned, obviously, we mentioned systemic stuff. So if someone came into you like, with hypertrophy in mind as the goal, as you said, that's mainly the goal. So, when would you sort of go into, because that's sort of, if you're looking at strength qualities, we look at that sort of slap bang in the middle. We've got functional hypertrophy, we've got strength, like metabolic strength, endurance work, strength, neurological work. When would you go this way, like going towards strength for somebody, and when would you push completely the other way if someone's been doing pure hypertrophy for a while?
Really, is there strength dropping off with hypertrophy? We could go neuro if they haven't done a neuro session in a while.
Yeah.
If they start to kind of have those issues to where conditioning is the limiting factor, or maybe they need to pull a little body fat off, and we'll put them in like a systemic phase. And again, that just kind of depends on where they're coming from. Like, what was their last deload? What did that look like? Was it metabolic? Yeah. Was it neurological? How long have they been in hypertrophy? I don't think there's a wrong way to go, to be honest with you. But if you just came from a systemic deload, I'm not going to put you in another one. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there if you're just simply trying to get away from hypertrophy.
Yeah. You mentioned systemic work. Yeah, so if someone needs to drop a little bit of body fat, we'll go into a more systemic block. Now, we mentioned calories isn't necessarily the thing we should be looking at when it comes to weight training. What are the advantages in your minds in terms of going into this like higher rep block for someone that wants improved body composition?
Well, when I program systemic, it's not even really higher rep. It's just more so how the program is set up, like the exercise sequencing, how the supersets are set up. What are the rest times like? That's a big one with systemic. And then like I said, it's good for body fat. You don't need, if someone comes to you and this is another thing to take into account. We always want to match the nutrition with the training. If someone comes to you like a metabolic stimulus like that, not a local metabolic stimulus, but a systemic metabolic conditioning stimulus, it's not going to require a ton of carbohydrates because there's not much volume per muscle group there. Like, you're literally training half or full body with maybe one, maybe at the very highest 2 exercises per muscle group. And that's rare. It's typically just 1 per muscle group. So you don't need a lot of carbohydrates to fuel that stimulus. So someone comes to you and they're under eating, they're not eating a lot of carbohydrates. You could put them in a short systemic phase as you're trying to build up those calories. It's not going to hurt them as much. You put them in like a local metabolic phase where it requires a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of glucose. You're going to drive up inflammation because you need carbohydrates to fuel that.
So like going into these specific phases, you mentioned a number of them there. And this is very similar in a lot of ways to the way I program as well. But the question I've always had with sort of this, like how, and I suppose it doesn't really matter. It's like setting a meal plan up where people overthink the setup so much that they never actually get them doing anything. But how specific do you reckon you could really get? Because if you're looking at sort of like a local, like hypertrophy sort of tension-based program, those A series are going to be very much geared towards that. Those B series slightly less so. By the time you're getting to your C series, I know it's maybe single joint that may be the answer. Like, fatigue's going to set in at that point where you are going to be shifting away from that stimulus anyway, in my mind. Am I wrong in thinking that, or is that's
shifting away from hypertrophy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, but like if you're looking at sort of like, I suppose I'm looking at this from a traditional sense of like, you got the old school Polican way of looking at strength ratios in terms of like functional hypertrophy, strength, endurance. You're probably going to more of a strength endurance stimulus the more someone just gets away from fatigue. The load's going to come down dramatically. Does that take away from being as specific as someone like a Kassem, for sake of argument, would argue that it has to be exactly in this very small.
Yeah. I think there's going to be an argument for anything that anyone says. There's going to be someone that finds a way to argue with it. Yeah. I'm particular about training phases, putting people in certain training phases. When it comes to things like that, like I'm not that meticulous about it.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I suppose like as you mentioned with the online training, it gives you a bit of clarity in terms of like, if I could be specific here, I can gear the nutrition here, and then I just see what happens and I make adjustments as I go, right? And if your programming is so vague, how do I learn what works and what doesn't?
Exactly, man. It's like, like initially, it's when you get a new client, it's like, especially when they come to you and they don't know what they've been eating. Like they've just been eating whatever for an extended amount of time. You kind of find this base amount of calories that you put them on, and then you assess and you monitor week to week. It's based off how you respond. And that's really that's all you can do. There's no like secret formula or like exact amount of calories this person needs to be on. You haven't really got to know that client yet. You don't know how they're going to respond to what you're doing until you assess for a couple weeks. There was another question you asked there too. I can't remember.
That was pretty much it. Like, I think we spoke about throwing the kitchen sink out early when it comes to training. I think when it comes to nutrition, I think I've seen coaches so often spend so long trying to get the initial calories, macronutrient ratios right, find the perfect split for them. And I'm like, just get them doing something. And then like, I spent that time you spent doing that, coach them. Do the actual coaching, build a relationship with that person.
Yeah, man. Coaching is so much more than macros and training program. Throwing that at somebody and telling them to go do it. I mean, especially we talk a little bit about it off the air here, but like people they're getting so detailed with these beginner people. Like you get someone who's never trained before, you get someone who's never counted calories or macros before, you get someone like that. It's about, you have to create a foundation for them first. Like you're going to overwhelm them more than anything if you hone in on like this specific training split or, this specific macronutrient count that you have to hit these people just need to worry about, let's manage stress a little bit better. Let's worry about sleeping a little bit more. Let's move a little bit more. Let's start eating whole foods rather than fast food. You don't need to like hit this exact macro count. Let's start from the ground up. Let's build that foundation. We can worry about that advanced shit in the future once you've created these habits and you're ready for something like that. Because you get someone like that and you throw that at them, it's like, whoa, what is this? I'm overwhelmed and I'm not going to do any of it. Well, instead of, if someone's never trained before, they're sedentary, maybe we start with 3 or 4 walks outside a week, and just get them eating more whole foods, get them going to bed earlier, get them getting more sleep, create that foundation, or else, I mean, you're setting yourself and them up for failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. I read it on a post for you. You posted recently on Instagram about, you were speaking to a client about going through their diary and setting non-negotiables. And like, I think like things like that are massively like skipped over when it comes to like coaching, because again, it's about the calories, about the macros. And I was like, well, a lot of the time, if you haven't like got their day in a good place, where have you got the time to do all of this? Where have you got the time to track this? Where have you got the time to do all these sessions and cardio? It's like, find that time first, and then you know what's truly available for the things you're giving.
Exactly. It's you gotta get your life in order first and get that foundation set. Like I had a guy reach out today and just checking. He's in college. He has a big exam on Wednesday. He's really been struggling with it. And this is kind of where coaching is more than that. I told him, like, dude, if you have to take up until Wednesday off of training, I want you to do that because I want you to do good on this exam. Like that's the most important thing right now. Training is going to be there after that, because I mean, he's a stressed out guy and he's got a lot going on. It's like, I don't want you to have to worry about trying to get a session in if it's going to take away from your study time. And that's where the coaching aspect, that's where you coach people, and more so than just, hey, eat this food, do this training, no excuses, go hard or go home bullshit. There's other things that come up in life, and they you're providing them a service, and you have to be there for them in that sense too.
Yeah, I remember, guys, I mentioned this a lot, but I remember getting on the podcast with Andrew Coates, and he was like saying that if you're looking at coaching, if this was a Harry Potter story, our job is to be Dumbledore, not to be Harry. And I think a lot of coaches try and make themselves the hero of the story, and it has those issues. Like even with coaches, like I came, not to the same extent as your clients come, but when I came in and spoke to you and Alan, it was like I can tunnel vision a diet, but yeah, and I'm all right. I'm not ridiculously obese, but I don't hold those habits. And like say, well, if that mindset was, we've got 10 weeks and you've got to be absolutely peeled to the bone, how would we have worked around my trip to the last minute trip to Dubai, my hotel quarantine?
We wouldn't have. Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, and that brings up a good point too. Like things like that come up. It's like, okay, these people are going to reach out to you. what do you want me to do in this situation? And you have to be there to support them through that, rather than just, like, well, find a way, stick to your plan. Like, sometimes shit just happens in life to where it's just not realistic, and you have to be able to coach those people through those situations. Or like, you get people with the mental half of things. It's just tough, and maybe they need a break. So I mean, they reach out to you, and like, I'll give people a full day off of just not weighing things on the scale. That doesn't mean go eat like an asshole, but at the same time, we're giving your mindset a little freedom from weighing your food and being so anal all the time. And people need that, especially these lifestyle clients.
Yeah, totally 100%. I think as well, it's like, it's setting good expectation on the off comes huge with any of this sort of stuff. Whether that is making sure the food's in the meal plan they are that they like, or even it's just things like this, or like going away, having a last minute holiday or a last minute trip, or something that comes up like the kid in college with the exam. It's a lot of people fear that if let's say they've lost 3-4 kilos, they're worried that if it comes back on, it'll never come off again. What goes on can always come off. Like, I didn't gain much weight over my holiday because I managed it better than I normally do, but I gained a little bit. I am way lighter today than I was when I got out of quarantine. But I was probably going into the holiday around about the 90 kilo mark, and with that first week of Dubai where I had the scales, I was sitting at about 90 kilos. I went back up to probably about an artificial 92 coming out of quarantine. And then I'm 88.4. So like, it's people often think like they're so fixated on, if I had a bad week, it's a failure. Where it's like, fine, just push the week. If you've got a goal, it'll be a week later. Like, life still happens.
Exactly. It's like, okay, well, you had a bad week. You have two choices. You can either kind of get back on the wagon, or you can completely fall off the wagon. And some people go with the latter, but that's unfortunate. But you really do. I mean, it happens, and it's going to happen again. It's about creating that mindset. Okay, now it's time to I had my fun. I had my week. Now it's time to kind of put my foot down and get back to reality and get back on the plan. Or, you do have some people that go the opposite direction, and it is unfortunate.
Yeah. And that's, we're going to talk about the benefits of online training earlier on. That's sometimes the drawback of online training. Like, because if that was one of your in-person clients, you could see the head drop. They're not feeling the same way. They're dragging the heels. You can hey, man, let's have a chat. But even online, those kind of people might just never reply to your messages ever again.
I know, and that's the thing. Like, we always want open communication, and I always tell people that on our initial call, like, hey man, I only know as much as you tell me. We encourage open communication. There's no such thing as too much information. Even like with the mental side of things, like, where are you at, how are things going, like it's important from a coach to a client to know what's going on in someone's life, so you can program for them, so you can try to support them through that as well. And going back to like throwing the kitchen sink, I think it's important to meet people where they're at currently. You cannot expect people, especially like competitors who are coaches, former competitors who are coaches, they expect everyone to live that lifestyle, and that's just not realistic. You have to meet these people where they're at currently, or they're not going to adhere to it. They're going to fall off the wagon completely.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Like, it goes back to that topic of giving people macro straight away, right? It's I always compare it to like trying to learn a new language. Let's say if you want to learn Spanish, and like people say, like, I often hear meal plans, they don't teach you anything. This has become my catchphrase the last year, because I'm a big pro meal plan guy initially. And eventually my aim is to teach people to be self-sufficient with their food, and maybe even eat intuitively, but eating intuitively got them to where they are right now. But if you put that in a context of like say learning a language, saying meal plan doesn't teach you anything. It's like saying, hey, I want to learn Spanish. Shall I have an audio tape or an app to learn it? No, just go to Spain. You'll pick it up. It's like you've gone too far ahead. Just going in this, how many foods are there in the world? Here's your numbers. Go.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And I tell people that initially, like, we'll get to where you're going to have some more freedom as far as subbing in. But like right now, you don't even know how to count macros. I can teach you that along the way. But for right now, it's the easiest route for you is going to be to just follow what's on this sheet of paper. Granted, there might be some free meals that flow in there, and that's fine. That's all about, it's going to be a gradual lifestyle change. I don't expect it to be perfect the first week, or maybe even the 6th week. It still might not be perfect. Everyone's a little bit different. But initially, I can agree with you there. It's much easier for someone like that to just follow what's on it rather than trying to substitute things in and out and they have no idea what's even going on. Because as a coach, it's like, in order to assess with the weekly check-ins, we need somewhat of compliancy. You can't be all over the place for that week and expect us to even be able to gauge your progress.
Yeah. And it's a level of consistency. Like I always say to my clients, very similar to yourself, I'd rather an honest, imperfect week sometimes than a false, perfect week. And like, a lot of times, like, I can't remember where I saw this. I think I saw it in a post on Instagram the other day where someone said, like, if you tell someone off for making mistakes, it won't stop them making mistakes. It'll just make them hide their mistakes. So when I look at a meal plan, I'm not looking for where they went off the meal plan. The first week I'm looking for is there signs of tracking error? Because that is if there's one thing I think that makes people frustrated in coaching programs and not get the results is errors in tracking where they think they're eating less than they are, because they're so common. And I looked for things like a client recently, and I looked at his food diaries, and I was like, you've had exactly 136 grams of turkey every day for the last week. Your calories have been exactly on the meal plan calories every day for the last week. Like, exactly. You've never gone 1 calorie over, 1 calorie under. I'm like, come on.
That's just to believe.
No, bollocks. I see 1 ounce of steak. Like, I see 13 and a half cashews. I see 0.3 of a glass of wine. I'm like, just say you had a bottle.
Yeah. No, I'm like you, because I've heard of some people, they'll get check-ins and their client will go off plan, and there's always context to it. But if someone's in prep, I can see where you might have a little bit of a different conversation with them. But general population, you cannot, like you mentioned, if you get onto them to an extent, it's going to make them start hiding. It's going to make them not be honest with their check-in. So yes, maybe call them out a little bit, but I always end it with something positive. Hey, let's try to do a little bit better here, but look at progress we made elsewhere this week. So this is good, but yes, we still need to improve here. And that keeps that communication good. It keeps them, they're going to continue being honest. I'm not going to come at you like an asshole. And I've heard of some of these people doing that. And like you said, it's just going to make them not want to be honest with you, or like be scared to check in even if they had a bad week.
Yeah. I also think it's a little bit condescending as well, right? I think sometimes, I don't know what it is about some personal trainers. Like, I think we've all been there. A lot of these people will, learn as they go and get better communication skills. But we almost forget that we're in a very, very small, very, very new bubble. The fitness industry is still very new. And it almost like people should expect to learn calories and macros, and people should understand it. It's like, well, I don't understand the stock market. And if I went into that world, I'd probably get shouted at for being awful. So I always look at it as like, okay, I'm going to give people the understanding of pros and cons. So rather than telling off going, why did you eat that pizza? I'm like, okay, let's have a look at what led you down the path where you chose that pizza. Understand that we can put that pizza in, but understand that it's going to be much more difficult to hit your food intake. You're probably going to be more hungry, and it's probably going to be harder to track this and be consistent. The choice is yours. But they know, I do this, I get less of the result. I do less of this, I get more of the result. Like, I don't mind what you do. It's your journey.
Yeah.
But I'm here to give you the honest truth.
Yeah, and the way that I explain it too, like, yes, we can improvise, we can do this. However, the progress where you want to get to, it's going to prolong it. It's going to take longer if we don't do it this way. And typically things will click in their head. Then they're like, okay, you know what? Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this doesn't match up with my goals. So I think more so of making them realize where they're mistaken rather than just like jumping on them and, coming at them in a way to where it's going to make them want to start hiding things from you.
So when it comes to like, what are the things you see working primarily online now I mentioned tracking error, but like when you're working primarily online, what are the things you find that people struggle with? Maybe either it's different to the one-to-one world, or even just exactly the same, that you feel that the biggest things that you find that hold people back from getting to where they want to be when working.
Man, I think everyone, like, I bet you every single person I work with is a little bit different in that aspect. So, everyone I feel like has their thing. Some people, it might be like they like sweets too much. Others it might be, I don't like doing my cardio, or I don't like training, or, maybe I'm not getting enough sleep at night. So there's so many moving parts there. It's way too many variables. I think everyone's a little bit different. Like I said, it could be like a lifestyle perspective. Like I'm not getting enough sleep, or like I have so much going on. I'm not mitigating that stress as much as I could. I'm not implementing these parasympathetic activities that I'm supposed to be doing to manage that stress. Or sometimes it's, I just like sweets, or I just like pizza too much, or, maybe I don't like cardio. So I think there's a variety of different ones there. I haven't really found a trend to where it's one thing for a lot of people. I think it's just different for everybody.
Do you find that, because it's an interesting one for anyone who watches this isn't a coach, do you find coaches are any different? Because some of the biggest breakthroughs I've actually had with clients is when clients realize that us personal trainers aren't these people that just every session feels like beast mode and we just can't wait for our next chicken and broccoli fix. And they're actually normal people too. We just prioritize this stuff. So yes. Do you find like you've worked with obviously a number of coaches, you work with people that do competitors, and you've worked with the general population. Do you find that the actual difficulties you face with those clients are any different, or do they all face exactly the same issues?
I think they're all a little bit different. I think it more so depends on not necessarily what their goal is, but them as a person and things that they've struggled with even from 10 years ago, things that still get brought up. I think everyone has a different journey in that aspect. What have you experienced? Do you think have you found a trend to something?
Not really. In terms of certainly between coaches and like working with coaches and working with general pop, I think the same things apply. They crave the same foods. They have the same stressors. They don't both have shocking diary management. Like you think working with like where I've worked with very, very high end people one-to-one for a number of years, and you think people with CEOs and business people think they're going to be more organized. They need to be more organized because they're running these multi-million-pound businesses. No, they just outboss a bad diary 9 times out of 10, and like it's chaotic. So I think the same things apply with most trainers. Like I've worked with obviously companies that often encourage trainers to do group photo shoots in the gym, and I have done for years in various places. And I've always, and I think it's a good thing to do because I think the clients can get themselves in shape. Sorry, trainers can get themselves in shape, tend to get clients in shape. I haven't seen an exception yet of someone who can put people in shape without never getting themselves in shape. But you see the same thing. You see the same thing of people not wanting to diet, people struggling with tracking. I've seen people. I've seen one person. He might listen to this, but he owns up to it, so he's fine. But he was so worried about overdoing his calories on a refeed that on his last carb up, he decided to eat about a kilo of stir-fry vegetables as his 300 grams of carbs, and that's why now whenever I give people a high day, I'm like, just give me a heads up of what you're going to have beforehand, just in case you panic and go the other way. So we all have those mental battles. And I think it's the only difference with trainers is that the training side of it often, not always, it's easier.
Yeah, the training is definitely easy for us to get in there because it's something that we enjoy at this point, or, hopefully is. No, one thing that I think this is more so from female population, and I love working with females, but I think we see this more often with females is they like to do too much and undereat for too long. That's one thing that I notice a lot of females that come to us. They've been undereating for a long period of time. They've been doing that, in that metabolic environment, trying to burn calories, doing all sorts of cardio for too long. Now their hormones are downregulated. Now they're in a bad place health-wise because they ran themselves in the dirt. I see that more often than not, specifically just because males we can adapt a little bit better to those things. It's not gonna hurt us as much. So when they overtrain and they undereat, it definitely affects them a lot worse. And I see that very, very often.
Yeah, I see it with I've done a lot of work with Luke Lehman. He always talks about like you tend to find guys and girls the opposite end of the spectrum. Guys probably need more metabolic conditioning, more aerobic work, whereas probably less direct hypertrophy work on the phase one. Whereas girls will probably need more strength and hypertrophy work, probably more.
Guys, we avoid that work. We don't like that work.
No,
Females love it for whatever reason.
do you find with the girls dieting themselves too long? Like, do you think there's a societal and a mental element in this, rather than necessarily entirely bad coaching? Because I always sometimes find that dead and wrong, bad coach out there that pick girls on 800 calories months and months on end. I've known plenty.
Yes.
I've worked for plenty of them. Again, get myself in trouble. Right, this comes after my non-compete ends. But like, I think it's as well as that. Like, yeah, there's more and more pressure than ever before for guys to be shredded in shape. There's definitely that. But at the same time, a guy can go a bit of a gut, and it doesn't really matter. Like, it's a normal thing. It's a dad bod. Whereas girls don't get the equivalent. They don't get a mum bod, and that pressure to stay in shape is. I would find there's much more of a battle trying to get a girl to increase her calories than a guy to decrease their calories.
Absolutely. And I don't know if it comes from, I think some of it stems from poor coaching, keeping females in that big of a hole for that long of a period of time. But I also think it comes from, like you said, they're in their head, they think they need to do more and eat less to get in shape. And they've been doing this forever. So they hit a plateau and they think, okay, well, the next step is to add 30 more minutes of cardio and decrease, 300-400 more calories until you're just in this hole. And then, the only way out of it is doing the absolute opposite, which a lot of them, unfortunately, don't do.
Yeah. I think in a way, I don't know if it's worse or easier with a competitive or like more serious female population, because in one way, they're more attached to it. It's harder to push them up. They've probably driven themselves into a hole for longer because they can mentally handle it. But at least you know sort of where to go. I find this is in the general pop female world, it's almost so much harder because you'll tend to find that people will start driving themselves into a hole. And then eventually they'll sort of burn out from that hole. So they'll stop tracking and they'll stop being as accurate. So you can get there. You often get a girl as a coach and you sit there and you look at her diet history and you go, okay, right, we need to really bring her up. And then on the flip side of that, you go, are you tracking your food in the last 6 months? No. Okay, so you either eating double as much and I need to pull your calories down, or we need to bring your calories up. And it's just like, judgment call. You've just got to go somewhere. How do you deal with those situations where you've got someone coming with you and because of like they've got a mental issue with maybe going lower, but they're just not tracking accurately. So where do you start? Is it just, how do you get them back on board with something that they maybe had a bad emotional connection to?
Oh, man. Are you saying that they have a bad emotional connection to decreasing food?
Maybe just tracking in general because they got burnt out from the diet. So they stopped being as precise with the tracking.
Tracking in general, I would give them time off from tracking. Like at that point, if they've been tracking for that long, they have a pretty good idea of what their portion size should look like. So at that point, we can just give them portion sizes. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be on the scale. If it's a mental thing with the scale, okay, well, let's get away from that for a week, a month, whatever the case may be. Let's work on restoring that the mental side of things before we go back into that. But at the end of the day, like in my personal opinion, like if you want progress to be optimal and you want to get to this destination as fast as you can in a healthy way, I think you have to track. I just don't think there's a way around it. I mean, I really don't.
Certainly, as you say, like I think I've come back around. It's eventually you've either got to be incredibly strict for a meal plan, which is great to start off with, but how long can we do it long term? Mm-hmm. Or we've got to track but precision nutrition get great results with the palm size portion control. But again, the downside of that, and obviously they get some great results. It's slow, it's habit-based approach. I'm very, very, I think it's very good for a lot of people. But you don't know how many people go really low on that and they don't know. And you're looking at telling someone on day one that we're going to have 12 to 18 months worth of dieting. That's just add a fish oil this week. Next week, add some protein palms. And great for a certain population, but sometimes the best way to get long-term change. There's tons of studies on this now, like having a quick initial win will actually help long-term change. As long as you know what you're doing to bring
100%, man. I just had this conversation with a client. It might have even been this morning or yesterday. She's just so set on, And I think solely focus on that destination, you can lose sight of that goal so easy. It's like I told her, just win the day. Like, have a goal today and win that goal. And then, guess what? Then you look up and you won the whole week. Take it day by day. Buy into the process. Don't buy into I want to be here 6 months from now, because, you're going to lose sight of that goal going throughout your days if you don't have something to focus on that day. Let's just check all of our boxes on that day, and let's continue to do that for months on end. And guess what? You might even hit your goal sooner than you thought. But people get so fixated on that goal, and I think it's so easy to lose sight of if that's all that you're focused on.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a really important point for most people. I've always like, if you tick those boxes every day, you'll be like, oh, I'm here, and you're not even aware of it. As opposed to, like, it's good to have half a night, something to give you a bit make today valuable and a bit more accountable to push you in those initial stages. But after a while, I always say when I'm dieting, the first week and the last week is the hardest. Because the first
I agree.
I'm getting new habits. I'm having to actually push myself out of my comfort zone to change. And then I'm visioning. Like now, we asked how's the diet going off the air on this call. I'm like, it's fine.
You're in the swing of it.
Last week it's Sunday, I can have a donut. And it's close. And then it's like, then it becomes more challenging. But in the middle, just head down and it becomes so easy.
I agree. And initially, I had a lady who she like her weakness was just sweets. And I'm like, just win that first day, win that first week. You're gonna have to, like, there's no secret around it. I don't have any secret, things that you can do to get your mind off of it, but just put your foot down. Just don't do it for a couple days. And I promise you, it gets so much easier. The more that you give into it, the more you're going to give into it the next day. It becomes so much easier to give into the more that you give into it. And the more that you say no to it, the easier it's going to get moving forward to you're going to get to a point to where you're not even thinking about it anymore. Kind of like you mentioned, the first day is always the hardest, and then kind of getting that in the middle of it. And it's like, well, this is just a habit at this point. It's easy. And that's just part of it. That's just how it works. Initially, that change, it is tough, because any change is tough. But I think with change comes progression too.
Yeah, anything you do that's important in life will be met with initial resistance. Like I say, it's for clients who struggle with training. I was like, I can't remember who initially told me this, but it's like, people struggle with training. I was like, well, like, everything's been met with resistance. Not the first time. If you're not used to working out, if every workout was enjoyable and you couldn't wait to do it, you'd have already been doing it up until now. So like, sometimes you just got to start, and then you do the next one, and then you do the next one. And then, like, over a while, when you start to build momentum, like, it becomes all of a sudden like, oh, I'm quite enjoying this. I'm getting stronger. Oh, I'm looking a little bit better. I'm like, then all of a sudden, like, oh, I can't wait for the gym. But it's not like that in week one. And I always say, people are struggling to the gym, I go, just go. Whether it's a home gym, which is worse because home gyms collect dust, unless they're like Alan's home gym, which is unbelievable. Home gyms, but it's either just go to the gym and do set one. And if after set one you're not feeling it, go home.
Yeah, leave.
No one ever goes home.
Or at least just get off your couch and drive to the gym. I bet you're not going to turn around and go home once you get there. Yeah. It's just that initial push is just what people need. Just like that initial first day is the hardest. That initial getting out of the house to go on that morning walk, or getting out of the house to drive to the gym. That's the hardest part. Once you've done that, you've already won. Yeah,
absolutely, 100%. I think it's a big lesson for most people. Just say it's taking those things up and going back to the sweet craving thing. It's like it becomes so much easier. I remember like how much I loved fruit towards the end of my last diet, and how much I loved like 98% dark chocolate.
Yeah.
And I come off my diet now. It gave me 98% dark chocolate. I'm like,
oh yeah. I can't go above like 95. It just gets bitter.
Yeah, I have to be in the hole. Like last time, like my last prep, I got really lean, and I wasn't on this the whole time. I started 300 grams of carbs. It was a good prep, but the last 3-4 weeks, health was in a good spot. Went like into 1100 calories, came out, and that time I was like, I love this 99% dark chocolate.
Yeah. And just going into the 1100 calorie thing, that's fine, but just whoever's listening here, he didn't do that for a prolonged period of time. You know, you cannot stay that low for 6-8 weeks like some of these people are doing. If you're looking for a cosmetic look for a certain day, you have to push things to an extent. But guess what? If you're not in it for that a prolonged amount of time, you will recover from it.
Yeah, and you mentioned you mentioned earlier about how we're looking at recovery, looking at stress, looking at sleep, looking at all these different factors. It's like that decision of when to pull the pin and push isn't based on, before it's based on the competition dates here. It should more be based on, are you in a good position to do this at all? Like, keeping it outside, your training volume comes down a little bit to accommodate. Your stress is good, your aerobic health is good. All right, go for it. But if none of those things are in place, just don't go there. I don't care when the date is.
No. Yeah. I mean, I think you have to, when you're talking like competition or photo shoot prep, whatever the case may be, I think you have to prep to prep. You have to prep yourself to go into that knowing that it's going to be a little bit unhealthy. But if you go into it in a good place, it's a lot less unhealthy than it has to be. You can't go into a prep like that already eating low calories or, already in a bad spot, or you're going to dig yourself a really deep hole that's going to be hard to come out of.
With because there's one thing I wanted to go on through. We've given a lot of love, and these are mainly universal tips regardless of gender, but we're giving a lot of love to the females here. One thing I often see with guys, which would be good to get your take on, is how do you manage, like, it's probably more general pop guys, bet competitors have it too because we have so much dysmorphia, is you trying to get guys that they're great to start with, and then you start getting close to a certain number on the scale, whether it's below 80, below 70, below 90, whatever it is. And that's the number where they start to feel skinny. And it'll often coincide with them feeling flat. And they'll start to self-sabotage around those. Like, how do you work with your guys to get through that, knowing that being flat is an inevitability? To be lean as you want, you'll need to be lighter. Like, when you hit those barriers, what kind of things do you do with your guys?
Yeah, that's a good point. I ran into this the other day. I got a guy prepping for a photo shoot. Being flat is a really good thing when you're trying to get lean. If you're going to get to that extreme condition, you're absolutely going to have to get flat. And that's just part of it. Granted, there's going to be some refeeds where we fill you out a little bit, but you're going to have to get to a point to where you are flat and, your muscle bellies aren't popping, you just look flat. You're not full at all. If you're going to get to a certain degree of condition, I think it's necessary, and you just have to explain that to them. You're not in a bad place. Like, I could feed you 300 grams of carbs tomorrow and you'd look like a new person, but we're not to that point yet. We need to keep pushing. So you're just explaining to them, like, this is part of it. You're in a good spot.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll trust you with that.
Yeah. I always, the best way I've explained it, a lot of times the biggest concern is that losing muscle, right? Is your strength going down the gym? No. Okay. Awesome. Are you, other than the first couple weeks of a big jog and glycogen and water, are you losing size off your extremities, arms and legs? No. Okay, cool. Yeah. And the way I often get Gen Pop to understand it, it's like, I always look at a sponge. Imagine, like, you got a wet sponge that's full of water. In this case, that's a muscle full of glycogen. You start training, it's like squeezing that sponge. The sponge is smaller, but it's the same amount of material that sponge is made of. We've not made the sponge smaller. It just looks.
That's a good way to put it. We just got to fill it back out. Yeah. And strength's going to drop at some point too when food gets that low, and that's okay. You just have to manage volume. You have to kind of reiterate to them, we're not going to put on muscle at this point. You're in a deep deficit. We're going to do what we can to maintain what you do have. So training volume has to be accommodated for that. It needs to be pulled down. Sets to failure likely are going to get pulled completely out at that point. But that's part of it. You can make the argument, like, are they natural? Are they using PEDs? If they're natural, yes, they might lose a little bit more tissue than someone using PEDs, but to get to that condition, again, it's just going to be part of it.
Yeah, I've literally had I do between these interviews, the podcast episode, a solo episode, and one of them I've got lined up in about 2-3 weeks is going through that. You have to get almost, get leaner than you want to be able to feed up to where you want to be. If you want to sit at 12, get to 8.
And you also probably are going to have to get flatter than you want to be at some point too. That's part of it.
great audio content, but I'll show you the picture that, if I can find it, that I use for the icon of that podcast episode. And it shows like I get a lot of people, and I go into this as well as in terms of social circles. Maybe this is a good one to end on for most people. It's like how like you'll often get social circles when you get flat. If you are all right with it, that's the first battle. The second battle of it's like understanding that people are going to self-sabotage you. It's like, are you well? You sure you don't want a slice of pizza? You've dieted hard enough now.
Yeah.
Like if they're good, or before we go into it, I'll go into your take on that. That was my wonderful Skeletor face about a week out.
That's funny.
What
was the question? People self-sabotaging you at that point when you're that lean?
Yeah. What's your take? What's your take on that? How do you like work people in through those barriers where people go, oh, are you well? That's what I get a lot. It's like, you sure you're not sick? You know. And
for me personally, if I'm like prepping for a show or something, that is my biggest pet peeve. Like, just have a little bit of this. It's not going to kill you. Like, you already look good. So like I don't recommend this for anyone, but this is typically what I do when I get to like that deep of a deficit. I just quit going around people for the most part because I want to avoid those conversations. It's like, man, I just mentally, I can't deal with that right now. I would just rather eat my food and, stay at home at that point. I'll deal with that after the show. But no, that's a big pet peeve for me. They don't understand the work that you put in. They don't understand like how much that could throw you off being how lean that you are, how much that could affect your look at that point.
Yeah. I think it's what you mentioned, also, like you've done this enough, you know the game well, you can move yourself away from people, as you mentioned. But obviously for a lot of people who listen to this, they're not going to like remove their wife or
you can't do that. I would advise not doing that.
But yeah, it's so like do you guys any like things you potentially tell your guys and girls when you get to that stage, sort of push through that sort of like the negative words consciously or subconsciously they're getting, or is it just sort of like, remember the goal, remember why you're doing this?
I mean, remember the goal, and also like, who are you surrounding yourself with at the same time? Because if you're surrounding yourself with people that that are real and that are good for you, I don't think they're going to self-sabotage you as much. I think the self-sabotaging is going to come from people who are envious of you, who are jealous because they don't have that look, or they don't have the mental capacity to handle what it takes to go through to get to that look. So I would reiterate, like, hey, this is coming from them talking to you like that is coming from a place of them knowing that they wouldn't be able to do that personally. Like, I would not take that personal, because the people that you're around every day, the people that are there for you, that I highly, highly doubt after seeing you go through something that brutal, they're not going to self-sabotage you at that point.
Yeah, totally agree. I'll add one little thing for people who work in offices that are dieting at the moment, is that if someone comes in with a box of anything, biscuits, donuts, anything like this, they will always, without fail, offer the dieting person first. Because if the person who's dieting has one, I feel better to have one.
They feel better, yes.
Even though I'm 40% body fat and had 3 on the way to the office.
Yep, I got a few like that, and he'll check in almost every week. Like, man, they had this and this at the office in the break room this week, and he's always the first person they offer because he's lost quite a bit of body fat, and it makes them feel better if they see someone like that indulging on it. But
grandma's the worst. Grandma's the worst because we're sort of like, obviously it's become more mainstream than ever before, people wanting to get particularly lean. Most people's grandparents live in a generation where they rarely met anyone like this, so they don't understand it. They're worried that they're sick. They're feeders and they want to feed them up. But like I'm quite outspoken and strong-willed to never see this, but I see it a lot with clients where they go to the grandmother's house and they just can't say no to the full.
Yeah. It like breaks their heart. My mom's actually the same way. She wants to, if you come to her house, she wants to cook for you. It makes her feel good. It's hard to tell people like that no, but at the same time, she gets it. She understands.
And I suppose it goes back to we talked about the balance thing earlier on, in terms of like understanding that like it's about health first. It's about managing those expectations where things come off. Now, if you're going 3-4 nights a week to your grandmother's place and she's feeding you, this is the thing we have to sort of create a strategy for. Yeah. That being said, unless your goal is stepping on stage.
Yeah.
My first prep, I took I took Tupperware to a funeral. What kind of knob does that? And but I was so in it and I didn't care. And I was like, looking back, I'm like, what a fucking dickhead. How disrespectful.
Yeah, I mean, man, as bad as it sounds, that's what it takes to get to that level. I mean, that's bad. And yeah, when I said I would go to my mom's and turn away food, I'm speaking like if I was in prep. Any other time, I'm having my mom's food. This like lifestyle wise, balance is definitely key. One meal a week is not going to make or break you. If you're 90% compliant the rest of the week, go out to dinner with your wife. Like that's just as important as the rest of the week. She's happy, you're happy, and you get to have that meal out or that date night, whatever the case may be. That's important. Now, I think what me and Simon are discussing here is these are extreme situations when we're taking Tupperware to funerals or we're telling our mom we can't eat at their house. Those are extreme situations, and we would do that any other time of the year if we weren't, in that diet.
With the thing like the weekly date night, just as you mentioned that, just a question that popped into my head. So obviously the importance of that in terms of stress management and recovery and all those things is paramount. Do you feel that's something that you feel is more, I don't want to use the word earn because it feels like you shouldn't have to earn a date night, but like, do you feel it's something that is easier to fit in and manage to a diet once you've gotten someone way more compliant and accurate with the rest of the week? Because I often find, like, I see people, like, I've got a client at the moment, you've probably seen on my social media, called Miku, who's about 2 weeks out from a photo shoot. That's unreal. But he is so, crosses every T, dots every I. He's so on point with his week that if I fill in with 400-500 grams of carbs on the weekend, it doesn't touch the sides. But you see people that, I did a video recently saying you're very clickbaity. I went, you're fat for the same reason you're broke. And it's like, I've had a lot of time in my life where I was very broke. And it was never, I shouldn't have bought that fourth Rolex that week. I shouldn't have booked a holiday to Ibiza 3 nights and 3 out of 4 weeks. It was too many coffees in Starbucks. It was the little unnoticed things. And that's where you'll get people to go, I just had one meal out with my partner and I'd all of a sudden gained 4 kilos. And putting aside, obviously, that is fat. But a lot of that is because the other days of the week are so inaccurate that they don't really have that window.
Exactly. And I have that conversation with just about everyone I work with. If you're 90% compliant Monday through Friday and you want to go out to dinner Saturday night, you're going to wake up Monday morning, no harm, no foul whatsoever. But that goes back to, were you 90% compliant Monday through Friday, or were you, now if you were 50% compliant and then you binge on the weekend, yeah, we're moving backwards at that point. And so it definitely person dependent, and it depends on, how well, because I have some people that'll tell me straight up, I can't handle a cheat meal on the weekends or I'll binge, which we obviously have some work to do with the relationship with food there. But I think it's so important to be able to do that and be guilt-free about it, because like I said, it's just not going to make or break you if you're 80-90% compliant the rest of the week.
Yeah, structure creates freedom, right? I heard that on a call the other day.
Yeah, but at the same time, that doesn't mean go out and eat until you're sick or, drink until you throw up alcohol-wise. It means, chew your food thoroughly when you're out to eat so your brain can tell you, hey, I'm full. You don't have to finish everything on the table until you're bloated and you feel sick. So that doesn't mean go out and you can just have a binger night. It means go out, have dinner with, friends, family, wife, and enjoy that. But at the same time, don't lose your mind over it, because that also starts to create this bad relationship with food. Hey, I'm just compliant during the week, so I can absolutely eat till I'm sick on the weekends. We don't want to have that either.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's like you mentioned chewing your food being one, like having strategies like that. I always say pick some with protein in it, pick some with something green on the plate, and then eat them first. And then you go and eat a tiramisu or portion of chips. That's different between half a bowl of chips and 4 bowls of chips. You're full. And I think strategies like that means you can allow people to have a meal where it feels like a mental break from dieting, where you've already damaged limitation bit without them having to really necessarily think about it. It's like going to a buffet and having one plate.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you choose whatever you want. You have one plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But this has been a good, man. I know you have your Saturday is a full work day until your evening, and then you've got your weekend. So I don't want to keep you too long. So for people who don't know where to find you, how can people learn more about yourself?
You could go to my Instagram. It's at BlakeWest22. You could go to our our website, it's maximumperformancetraining.net. That would probably be the best two places to learn about me, learn about us, learn about, our approach to coaching.
Okay, cool. To leave you with one silly question. Because we obviously spoken a lot about dieting foods, spoken a lot about cravings, spoken a lot about those sort of stuff. What is your favorite in diet food? Whether that could be while you're
dieting.
That's either something you always fit in or something that helps you get you through your day. It could be as clean as you like or as manageable as you like. What's your favorite food to keep you going when you're dieting?
Honestly, this is so basic: rice cakes and almond butter.
Bro.
Yes, that's my thing. That's usually in my meal before bed, and I look forward to it every single night. But at the same time, like when you're dieting, everything's good. Like I will crave chicken and rice. Like I will crave rice more than I've ever craved rice in my life. You just crave food at that point. Everything tastes good.
Yeah.
But no, if I had to pick one, it would probably be the rice cakes and almond butter.
Almond butter is dangerous though, man. I in my house. I get PB2 because I know that if I give myself peanut butter, that scoop in by week 4. Yeah. There is no joke. We had a client come into the gym recently that says he's got to have peanut butter in his diet. He has to. I'm like, why? Yeah. He's like, he's got to train. I asked him why. He went, because I'll get cramp. Have you tried salt? Have you tried vegetables? Have you tried water? Start there first, and then we'll see about this.
It's got to be the peanut butter.
Yeah. What's on that topic? What's your favorite non-dieting food? If you had free reign.
Non-dieting food, I'm a big sushi fan. I'm also a big boneless wing fan.
Oh, that's a good shout.
That's my two. I'm honestly, I'm not picky. I like tacos. We could have a whole podcast on non-dieting food. I'm a big foodie.
if you ever want a round 2 to talk food and greasy food and do literally the opposite of this show, this is not just a fitness podcast. I've always said to Luke Lehman when he went off, we went did a one about posture and performance and mechanic stuff. And Luke at the end, we just went off on a tangent about travel and Hong Kong, and he was like, "I want to do a Rogan style one. We just chat about anything, and I don't talk about training." I'm like, "Fine, block out."
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm a big foodie. Everywhere I go, I have to try the restaurants. I'm not a picky person. I'll eat just about anything you put in front of me. But yeah.
Yeah. I was always an Indian or a burger guy, and then I moved here, and Thai food is just I've just got the bug for it.
Yeah.
I said this to Luke Lehman the other day. It was a funny Thai story. Eventually he's gonna hate me for keeping telling the story. But we got Jordan Shallow down to the gym last January 2020, just before pandemic hit and no one could get anywhere. And Mike was like, we've got to take him out for him and him and his missus out for lunch. So my mate loved this little Thai restaurant called Little Thai Hut. And have you been to Hong Kong?
No, I would love to visit. The pictures you post, it looks unreal.
Yeah, amazing. If the world ever opens up, you have a spare room, you're more than welcome.
Yeah.
But the rents are premium, right? It's mega expensive here for very little. But this place is narrow. So we're taking.
You said it's very expensive there?
Very expensive. Day to day, you can get food that's cheaper than anything you'll ever imagine, or you can get food that's more expensive than anything you imagine, everything between. But rent is extortionate.
Yeah.
So we take Jordan Shallow to this tiny little Thai place with a sliding door, so he's inwards. We said we've got to get A2 2 egg, which is the pad krapao, so minced pork, an egg, some chili, some rice. Bang it. He's like, no, I'm going to get 2 portions of the half chicken and rice. And he couldn't get his head around the fact that the chicken was cold and the water was warm. And I'm like, welcome to Hong Kong. The first meal I had here was something called a hot pot. Have you ever heard of hot pot? The hot pot is this you basically have this big boiling broth you put in in front of you, and you have all these foods a little bit like a buffet thing. You've got all these foods up, cook it yourself. You just stick them in the spicy broth, and you'll you cook some there. So I went with a local Cantonese guy. So we had some stuff that I would normally know. I'll get some chicken wings. I'll get some meatballs. And then he went and spoke to the waiter in Cantonese to make sure I didn't understand what he was ordering. He got duck blood. Now, duck blood, I'm like, all right, black pudding, if you know from the big UK favour. Love black pudding. Okay, if it's like black pudding, I like it. No, it's like jelly, red jelly. But then the weirdest one was prawns. I'm like, okay, I like prawns. And then you You grab the stick and you realize that prawn on the stick is still moving.
Oh no, I have another client in Hong Kong, and he loves eating prawns.
Yeah.
I've never had it. You said it's still moving?
It's still moving. Well, until you put it in the broth, you have to do the final D. They make
You cook it, yeah. I don't know if I could do that.
It's not a regular thing. Don't worry. You're not going to be eating chicken feet and alive prawns every time you come here. Just every time. Get Texas barbecue. Don't worry. You can get everything in the world. You get sushi. You're fine.
Okay.
Cool, man. Well, I'll leave you to it. But thank you very much for this. It's been great fun. And obviously, I'll speak to you soon. So I'll be checking in tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds good, brother. I'll talk to you soon.